I'm in Carmen, Manitoba with Marla Riekman, soil fertility specialist with Manitoba Agriculture. Marla, we've had a rather challenging year with weather conditions when it comes to moisture, and I'm thinking about crop fertility and crop nutrition. How is that looking right now with some of the crops in southern Manitoba?
So for the most part, things are looking pretty good. I have heard of a few situations where maybe some fertilizers or nutrients aren't quite making it into the crop as we would expect, especially with some of the dry conditions we've had. So a couple of years ago, we had a lot of issues like this too with the kind of early dryness that we saw 2 summers ago, where we started to see a lot of nutrition, like plant nutrition deficiencies, essentially, or nutrient deficiencies showing up in the crop that weren't necessarily deficiencies because of the lack of fertilizer application, but more the lack of or water to be able to have adequate crop growth.
Right. So are there any particular crops that are struggling in southern Manitoba or in certain regions because of this?
Not anything in like particular that I've been seeing so far. Have had a few calls around some of those longer season crops. I did actually get a comment made to me the other day about seeing some early phosphorus deficiencies in corn. So some of those crops that are, more kind of needing that early season application or the early access to phosphorus in order to kickstart that growth. In that particular case, actually, it was a corn crop following canola, so corn after canola syndrome.
Right.
And so in that case, it was more of a lack of starter phosphorus to kind of overcome that situation. But I'm not hearing about a lot of really crazy deficiencies so far, although people have been watching. We're watching for things like sulfur deficiencies in early season canola. We're watching for, again, phosphorus deficiencies or things that will show up, especially when a crop just can't access the nutrient if it doesn't have the water it needs in order to take that nutrient out.
Right. So when it comes to assessing nutrient deficiencies, now at the beginning of the year, of course, farmers do the best they can to put whatever they need in the ground so that the crop will take it up when they need it. But right now, then they would do a soil test. Now, what type of tests are they looking to do to assess what might be going on with their crop?
So if somebody is seeing something that looks like a deficiency, they'll want to be doing a tissue test. And so in terms of what that tissue test looks like, the way that tissue test will be done is different depending on the crop growth stage and the crop type. So that's something that they just want to check in with the lab. So whichever lab that they're looking to submit to, the lab will have a list of how you would take or what you would submit, how many plants you're taking, if it's a certain leaf, if it's the whole plant, all that sort of thing will come from that lab requirement. And when you're doing a tissue sample, if you're seeing spotty areas in the field, quite often we'll see areas that, not the entire field is looking bad, but some areas are looking worse. Then we always suggest going in and taking a tissue sample in the bad area, but also taking a tissue sample in the good growing area too, so you've got something to compare against. Sometimes it's also nice to take a soil test at the same time in that good and poor growing area too, again, just to see, is it the soil deficiency or is it the plant deficient at taking up what the soil has?
I see.
That sometimes can tell a bit of the story.
Okay. So at that point, I guess, is a grower looking to do a full year application of a fertilizer, likely if they need to bump up something, I suppose?
Yeah, they may be, depending again on the type of nutrient that they're looking at. And so maybe, putting on some top dress nitrogen, sulfur if it's a rescue treatment in canola, maybe they're looking at sulfur treatments, things like that there might be the ability to kind of get on top of it. Some crops you don't really have an opportunity to use a top dress. And sometimes, unfortunately, those just become learning opportunities, right? To take a look at what happened this year. Did I put not enough down? Did I rely on the soil supply where the soil just wasn't able to supply it this year? Some cases, maybe I put a little too much down with the seed. We do hear of that quite often too with, having seed placed injury, where we went too hot, especially in a year that's dry, like we've started off being a bit dry this year, is that in those cases, those soils may not be able to buffer that impact of having too much of that starter phosphorus or that seed place fertilizer, phosphorus or sulfur in the case of canola. And so, those types of impacts are things we want to watch for as well that can also come along with these drier conditions we've been seeing in the spring.
Right. And when it comes to drier conditions, do we see that macronutrients or micronutrients suffer on a different level, or just basically about the same?
It's very similar, I would say. In a lot of cases, some of those things like nitrogen and sulfur that really move to the crop with water, when we don't have that water uptake, we're really going to see more of that impact where you don't have the water flow to move nitrate and sulfate that move with water into and up into that crop. But that being said too, when we have dry conditions, we just don't often have good root development. And when we don't have good root development, especially in that surface where normally you would get a lot of fine roots, we have a limit in how much nutrient is taken up for those micros as well. Because that's really what the root is trying to do. It's trying to explore the soil and access nutrients from different places within that soil. And a lot of the things like micros, like phosphorus, potassium, those nutrients that don't move with water tend to be up at that soil surface. And so then the question is, do we have enough moisture at that soil surface to actually get the roots growing and actively taking up nutrients in that area of the soil?
Okay, is there anything you wanted to add about crop nutrition I didn't ask you about today?
I think really it's about making sure that ultimately we're always trying to do our best in terms of what that target crop kind of yield is going to be, making sure that we're using good soil testing techniques as well, and going out and being able to document that. Not everybody does do a soil test every year, and it doesn't mean that you have to do a soil test every year, but one of those things, if we're able to kind of document how much crop has removed of the field kind of year to year to year, going in and soil testing every second year, every third year might be good enough in some cases. But when we're trying to kind of figure out what's really going on with some of these issues and seeing whether or not the nutrients we've applied are actively being taken up well by the crop, being able to document that with soil testing can really help us to target things in a little bit better in future years.
Great. Well, thanks very much for your time.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay.